Library computer. Data being received. Working.
Fascinating.
You're in the hands of an adolescent.
Okay, welcome to the October 2025 edition of What Tim Read This Month. I'm recording this on October 28th of 2025. It's a few days early because otherwise it would probably be a few days late. I have to teach a Bible study tonight. I go to church tomorrow. I have a book club meeting on Thursday, and so on and so forth. I got something going on Friday, too. I have absolutely no idea. I'll have to check with my social secretary to remember what that is. So I'm doing it a couple days early, which means that in the November video, the first one or two books might be stuff I actually finished in October. I don't know if that's a federal offense or not, but I'm just going to have to go with it. So here's what I read during the course of October. The first is a book about books, Samuel Pepys and his book by Kate Loveman. I learned about this one via a podcast. I had to do an interlibrary loan to get a copy because the thing is mind-numbingly expensive to buy. But it was an excellent book. It's a scholarly work examining the reading and book collecting habits of Samuel Pepys. It uses his famous diary and other sources to also study the reading habits of people in general in Restoration England. It's very detailed as it covers what sort of books were collected, to what purpose they were collected, how they were read and discussed, how bookshops operated, and how people organized and cataloged their private libraries. It's really cool. I enjoyed learning about that doctors at the time actually suggested taking a walk while reading for exercise. I don't know how you avoid running into trees or lampposts or something if you're reading while walking, but there you go. I enjoyed I enjoyed learning that somebody would read aloud in a coffee house and then discuss the book with others. Books were often purchased unbound, with a buyer then carefully picking out a cover and binding that he liked for the bookseller to finish putting the book together. Altogether, I had fun with a book. I had fun as a book nerd, reading about other book nerds. We're separated by over 300 years, but there's definitely a kinship there. Next, I read another work of nonfiction. I enjoyed genre fiction so much, and that is the bulk of what I read. It's probably unusual for me to read two works of nonfiction in a row, but I did. One was about books, and the other's about baseball, two of the greatest gifts that God has given mankind. And Can't Anybody Here Play This Game by Jimmy Breslin is just another wonderful book. It's about the 1962 Mets. And they were the worst team in the history of baseball. They were really bad. And this book about them is both hilarious and actually kind of touching. What makes this a great book is that even when Breslin is making you laugh out loud, when he describes some of the absurd fielding and base running mistakes that the Mets regularly made, you never feel like he's mocking the Mets. Breslin makes it clear that the Mets are his team, and that the team of New Yorkers, and they're the team of the New Yorkers in general. And he explains why. One reason is he reminds us that before TV, our culture was one in which we went out to experience sport events together. It was much more of a shared cultural experience than today. And the Mets in '62 were perhaps the last gasp of this before television finished changing things forever. Everyone loved the Mets. Well, probably unless you were a Yankee fan, but then, you're a bad guy if you're a Yankee fan. Sorry. And Breslin explains why. This is a direct quote from the book. So the Mets are a bad ball club. All right, they're the worst ball club you ever saw. So what? The important thing is that they're in the National League, and they are familiar. The National League, to a lot of people in New York, is hard to describe, but it's important. Like the chip on the table in the living room where you were growing up. It was always there. Sometimes you can buy 10 new tables over a lifetime, but the one with the chip is the one that makes you feel the best. People are that way about the National League. So, can anybody play this game? My brother was visiting in town, and he loaned me this book. I'll pick it up again when he comes back to Sarasota. and I am glad he did. This was just such a fun little book. Next, we have Suicide River, written by Len Levinson. It was originally published under a pen name, John Mackey. And this is part of a series I've been reading through about soldiers in the Pacific during World War II, and it's a strong entry in the series. The recon platoon is still on New Guinea, running patrols behind Japanese line. They bring information back in the form of both captured documents and a prisoner, all of which points to a huge Japanese counterattack at a specific place and on a specific night. Now, the book is stuffed with its usual over-the-top action, but it also spends time exploring the nature of command, with various generals and colonels debating the validity of the intelligence that's been collected. Is it real, or is it a trick of the Japanese? If it's real, how do we know if the Japanese have changed their plans? Some officers make decisions based on what's best for their men. Some make decisions based on wishful thinking. Some make decisions based on what they think will further their careers. Now, the extended climactic battle scene is the Japanese attack, which forces the American troops into a last-stand situation, desperately hoping that reinforcements will arrive before it's too late. Among all the chaos, Sergeant Butsko, still recovering from a wound he suffered in the last book, is organizing a desperate defense of an army hospital, using orderlies and walking wounded for his troops. I got 2 more books to go in this series before it's done, and I'll be kind of sad when it ends. Next we have The Moon Maid by Edgar Rice Burroughs. Now, the Edgar Rice Burroughs podcast that I co-host is back in action. We just recorded an episode on this, so you can get an in-depth discussion about this book by listening to that. And just my general review, Edgar Rice Burroughs takes us to the world beneath the surface of the moon. It's inhabited by an intelligent but brutal race of quadrupeds called the Vagas, and a human race called the Uga. The protagonist is Julian. He's the commander of a spaceship trying to fly from Earth to Mars. And a drunken, bitter crewman, who will later prove to be the main villain of the book, sabotages the engines, and that forces them to land on the moon, where they descend through a crater and discover an inhabitable world beneath the surface. Julian and the crewman who got them stuck there, his name is Orthus, are soon captured by the Vagas, that's the quadrupeds. A lot of illustrators portray them sort of as centaurs, but in the book they're described as just the 4 legs, no arms, with their 2 front legs being able to used as arm, being able to carry things. They have opposable thumbs, and they can rear up and use weapons. Now there's an Uga, human woman, Na-Ila, who's also captured. Later, when they're able to make a getaway, Julian and Na-Ila are separated. Julian's captured by the Kalkars, the faction of humans that rule most of the moon. And these are the bad guys. Burroughs wrote this book and its 2 sequels in part to criticize communists. And the Kalkars are actually a very effective and very realistic metaphor for the brutality and the inefficiency of a communist regime. Now, when Julian gets away from the Kalkars and finds Na-Ila's home city, which is the only city still independent of the Kalkars, he's soon neck-deep in palace intrigue, revolution, sword fights, and eventually an attacking Kalkar army that's equipped with advanced weapons designed by Orthus. The novel ends with an obvious sequel hook, and in fact, the 3 Moon novels are often published together in a single volume. But this one holds up on its own. It's full of the sort of action Burroughs excels at writing, and gives us a satisfying ending. Planet of the Apes #2, Escape to Tomorrow. These were published in the early 70s, I'm going to say about 74, when the TV series was on, as, media tie-in novels to the series. And this one, sometimes these tie-in novels were original stories. Often they were novelizations of episodes, and the Planet of the Apes books went with the novelization route. This one novelizes? Okay, if that's not a word, it is now. I just coined it. 2 episodes from the TV series, The Surgeon and The Deception. Now, the first one, The Surgeon, begins when Verdon, that's one of the humans, he takes a bullet wound. Galen, their chimp friend, has to convince an old girlfriend, a doctor, to treat a human. Later, Galen and Burke have to break into Dr. Zaius' home to steal a book on human anatomy, and to guide the doctor. They need this book to guide the doctor in removing the bullet. Now, the other episode that's novelized is The Deception, and that has the three friends stumbling into a situation that's reminiscent of the Ku Klux Klan. It's an obvious metaphor for that. Apes wearing masks are driving out local humans, burning homes, and sometimes killing the humans. Verdon, Burke, and Galen, who suffer from chronic hero syndrome, naturally decide to put a stop to it, which involves Galen going undercover and Burke inadvertently getting a blind lady chimp who thinks Burke is a chimp to fall in love with him. Now, as is typical with the series, the plots lean heavily into melodrama, but there's occasional bits of action to keep the pace from slowing down too much. Galen and Burke's heist of the medical book in the first story was particularly fun. Next, we come to a pretty awesome anthology. This is really a volume that helped the sword and sorcery genre become as popular as it would be. Swords and Sorcery, edited by L. Sprague de Camp. And it really is great. This is a superb selection of stories. It leads off with a Poul Anderson story that features a fun plot twist. There's a classic dark fantasy by Lord Dunsany. Robert E. Howard, Henry Kuttner, Fritz Leiber, and C.L. Moore are represented by tales respectively featuring Conan, Prince Rainier, Fafford and the Grey Mouser, and Gerald of Jory. The Kuttner story, by the way, is the second of his 2 Prince Rainier stories. Because I hadn't read either of them before, I was forced to pause in reading through this and find the first one to read before continuing on with this book. I mean, gee whiz de camp. Kuttner only published 2 of them, and you picked the second. It's just no respect for those of us with reader's OCD. Anyway, Lovecraft and Clark Ashton Smith round out the book with tales that are as much horror as sword and sorcery, though the same could be said of the Kuttner and the Moore stories as well. Every story in here is at least good, and several are excellent. For sword and sorcery fans, this one is a real winner. The Return of Sherlock Holmes. I have been reading through the canon again because you just have to from time to time. And this is the one where he returns from the dead, supposedly being killed in the story The Final Problem, which was the last story in the previous anthology. And this one just has a number of classic Holmesian moments. His return from the dead in The Adventure of the Empty House reminds us of how Doyle could make an extended stakeout scene tense and suspenseful, much like he had done in The Adventures of the Red-Headed League. The Adventure of Charles Augustus Milverton gives Watson several moments of awesome, as he shows his willingness to take on a pistol-wielding villain while he's armed with only a chair. Later, when Holmes decides to commit a felony, break into a blackmailer's home to recover blackmail materials, Watson threatens to turn him into the cops unless the good doctor is allowed to share the risk. Watson's at his best in this story. It's one of my favorite stories because of that. The Adventure of the Three-Quarter gives Holmes and Watson a delightful "we are total nerds" moment when the coach of a rugby team explains his problem in rugby terms, and our 2 heroes are completely lost trying to follow him. I also like this one in that Holmes shows great detective skills, but the story unfolds more in the style of a police procedural rather than giving us a specific instance of brilliant deductive reasoning. Now, the last story in here, The Adventure of the Second Stain, has Holmes recovering a document for the government, and thus preventing a world war. So, Holmes is vital to the way history actually played out, isn't he? Drop into Hell by Lou Cameron. Now, last year I read a book called The First Blood by Lou Cameron, another World War II novel, and I liked it a lot. Now, this one, it actually shares a couple of the same characters, and this one's not quite as good, but its flaws are fairly minor, and I still enjoyed it, especially the fast-paced ending, where surviving paratroops are trying to stay ahead of pursuing Germans to get to a place where a plane can pick them up, without any guarantee that the plane will be there at all. The mission involves a platoon of paratroopers dropping into Germany with a British technician to sabotage a hydrogenation plant. This is a place where coal is turned into gasoline. Because the place is located close to a hospital housing Allied POWs and close to a slave labor camp, the idea of simply bombing it is vetoed. The paratroopers have to complete their mission, then somehow get away. This is Germany before D-Day, so escape options are limited. One possibility is crossing the border into Switzerland, though the commander of the mission isn't happy with a plan that takes him and his men out of the war. Also, it turns out that the Russians, the supposed friends of the Allies, have reasons for wanting the British technician dead. The mission goes less than smoothly, with one of the 3 planes crashing en route to the drop zone, leaving the platoon undermanned. Other bumps in the road follow, including at one point the need to stuff more than one body into the trunk of a German staff car. And there's a very unexpected and abrupt death of a main character before the mission is completed, and the paratroopers make a run for it. An escape plan is improvised, but it depends on the cooperation of high-level decision-makers back in London, including that of a general who can't be found because he's getting drunk and hitting on a woman in a pub. Now, the pacing's a little slow in the middle of the book, and there's a side plot involving a wounded and captured paratrooper that never fully connects with the main plot. But, as I said, the climactic escape is excellent. The book's outlook on military bureaucracy and hypocrisy is very cynical, but there's also underlying elements of courage, duty, and loyalty to one's companions. The Starless World by Gordon Eklund, a Star Trek novel. And in this one, the Enterprise gets trapped in a Dyson sphere. It's a huge sphere, 93 million miles in diameter, that's built around the sun, so people can live on the inner side of the sphere. There's enough room for trillions of beings, but the only intelligent life is a small village of natives and some Klingons who've gotten trapped there before the Enterprise arrived. Also, the sun is apparently a sentient being with godlike powers. And finally, the sphere is moving towards a black hole. There's a lot going on here, a lot that Kirk and his crew have to figure out if they're going to escape and survive. And the premise of the book is intriguing, though it's a little slow-paced at times. But the author also, to his credit, catches the personalities of the crew effectively, though there are a few times when Spock's dialogue isn't quite, well, Spocky enough. It's a good, though not a great, Star Trek novel. Now, from the far future, I jump back into the past with Davy Crockett, number 4, Mississippi Mayhem, by David Robbins, originally published under the pen name David Thompson. And I've been reading through this Davy Crockett series. There's 8 altogether, so I'm halfway through at this point. And this is perhaps the most fun, and certainly the most unusual of the ones I've read so far. Davy and his sidekick Flavius Harris are canoeing down the Mississippi. They're heading for St. Louis to sell the furs they've collected. Now, after dealing with a couple of guys who want to kill and rob them, they join up with a trapper named Hoodoo Tom. Never trust anybody named Hoodoo Tom, by the way. This does not work out well. The trouble is that Hoodoo Tom is being pursued by Indians who have a grudge against him, and Hoodoo Tom won't explain what that grudge is. And after temporarily escaping from those Indians, Flavius is separated from the group, and he's captured by a small tribe that's apparently the last remnants of the supposedly extinct mound builders. Now, this tribe worships a huge bird called the Thunderbird. And when Flavius is staked out atop a mound as a sacrifice to the Thunderbird, he finds out the huge meat-eating avian is terrifyingly real. Now escapes and battles ensue. When Davy and Flavius and Hoodoo Tom get away from that tribe, they run back into the Indians who want to kill Tom. And then Tom himself might not be the most reliable ally. You know, the more time you spend with him, the more time you begin to suspect that the guy is just plain nuts. Now it really is fun. It throws Davy and Flavius into a roller coaster plot that twists through various dangers while smoothly bringing a myth to life to put them in a particularly unusual situation. And all of this is peppered with several excellent action scenes. What do we have next? Another work of nonfiction. This one I'm reading I read for the book club that the local chapter of the Sons of the American Revolution have going. And it's Bunker Hill, A City, a Siege, a Revolution by Nathaniel Philbrook, a superb historian. I recommend anything he's written, particularly his book on the Mayflower. This one, the Bunker Hill book, is an excellent history, not just of the battle, which was actually fought mostly on nearby Breed's Hill, but also of events that took place before and after. It gives the battle important historical context. Now, Philbrook's views of all the events, the beginning of the Revolution, is very balanced. The Patriot movement was messy, with incidents such as the looting of Thomas Hutchinson's home or the tar and feathering of customs officials. And of course, issues such as slavery muddied the ethical waters even further. But in the end, Philbrook effectively points out that the Revolution brought about the idea that all men are created equal, even if our country would take some time to fully realize this. This is paralleled to a degree with the tracing of Washington's evolution into a great military leader. Now, Philbrook's descriptions of the battle are superb. He's giving us a clear understanding of the tactical situation. We can follow along with the battle and always understand what's going on. The same is true with his descriptions of Lexington, Concord, and the Siege of Boston, and Henry Knox's noble train. Philbrook also traces the life of Joseph Warren, the Patriot leader who did much to organize and support the movement. He was a doctor and a politician, and he went to Bunker Hill to fight as a private soldier, despite having been appointed a major general. Warren was killed during the battle, and Philbrook gives us a few interesting ideas about how history might have played out differently if Warren had lived. Now, I do have one minor objection to this book. Philbrook places the Boston Tea Party into the same category as some of the unruly mob activity that took place during the same period. And I have to disagree with this. The Tea Party was very well organized, the leaders ensuring that the tea was all dumped, nobody got to keep any and profit for themselves, there was no looting. The only private property other than the tea that was damaged was a lock on one of the ships, and a replacement was sent the same day. Amidst all the chaos of that time, the Boston Tea Party is an example of protesting done right. But that's just a small part of an excellent history that reminds us that our patriot ancestors were far from perfect, but they would fight for what they believed in, and they would accomplish great things. Mouse Guard, Legends of the Guard, just a delightful graphic novel collection. The premise involves patrons at a tavern telling stories, with each story illustrated by a different artist. Often the artist was also the writer, but if there's a different writer, it was a different guy for each story. This wonderful artwork abounds as we read tales of brave mice who battle foxes and hawks and sometimes evil mice to keep their people safe. I enjoyed every story in this anthology, though my favorite is one called Whirly and the Mink, with art by Gene Ha and a story by Lowell Francis. It's about a banker mouse, literally he runs a bank, who in order to collect a debt, he must slay a monster and rescue a lady, and he comes away from the adventure with a bigger prize than he expected. There's another one, Crown of Silver, Crown of Gold, that involves an evil mouse king who pulls an Uriah the Hittite gambit to get rid of his top warrior and clear the way to marrying the girl he lusts after. Things don't work out as he planned. I think I would call that my second favorite tale. But picking a best story is very subjective. This is, I just really did enjoy every story in this. And finally, we have The Mystery of God's Will by Charles R. Swindoll, an excellent book of Christian theology. This is powerful. It's clearly written. It's a study of God's immutable and sovereign will. Swindoll clearly states that the plans of an omnipotent God will usually be a mystery to us. We often won't know what the heck's going on when we're serving God. We don't know why doors open. We don't know why doors close for us, or why we endure hardship or suffering. But Swindoll uses scriptural evidence and anecdotes from his own life and ministry to show that we can always trust in God's mercy and wisdom. Swindoll gives us advice for how to determine God's plans for our life, consulting scripture, prayer, advice from other Christians, and so on. And he stresses that acknowledging God to be in charge means we must be willing to do the work he gives us. And that's it for October 2025. I'm thinking about doing these twice a month and making each one a little bit shorter. And I just enjoy doing them. I know I only have a few regular listeners, and I appreciate you guys. And please leave comments to know that I'm still out there. And if the numbers for this channel grow, that's fine, but I'm not really worried about it. I'm a book nerd, and I enjoy talking about my books, and this is an outlet for that. Two separate people actually asked for something specific, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to compile a PDF copy, what I read this year, a record of the books I read in 2025, with the hopes that my remarkable good taste in books will be the salvation of Western civilization. So I'm going to mail this as a PDF, email it to a PDF to anyone interested, and I will include an email address in the show notes. If you're interested in a copy, I'll mail it out in late December or the beginning of January when I've finished reading everything I'm going to read for this year. It will include reviews of all what will probably be about 150 to 160 books that I read over the course of this year. So that's it for now. Once again, thank you for listening.